And we're going to be talking about your books, The Dark Siege. This is based on a case that you did when you were in high school as an intern. Do you want to tell people a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I wasn't in high school at the time, actually, but I worked with Ed and Lorraine Warren when I was just a sophomore in college.
Oh, college.
And I wrote a column called Hauntings for the Sacred Art University Spectrum newspaper about the cases we were investigating together. And I actually transferred out to Washington State, where Lorraine asked me to investigate a case on the Warrens' behalf because I was right adjacent Idaho. And when I graduated out there, I came back to Connecticut and I put on a seminar called Transcendence, which I was putting on in Westport, and a family that was in dire straits actually found that flyer. They had no interest in the paranormal. They had no idea who the Warrens were, even though Connecticut's a very small state. They had no inkling about how to contact anybody for help, and they were actually experiencing what was going on was inhuman diabolical infestation and oppression at that time. And so they actually found my ad while they're having dinner or lunch at a diner in Connecticut, and they called me. Had very difficult time getting a hold of me. There was like crackling on the other end of the phone line. I never received the call. And when she finally got through to me and explained to me what was going on, I realized how serious this was. So I called my mentor, Ed Warren. And Ed, of course, is one of 7 demonologists in North America at the time, and Lorraine, a light trance medium. And now they're the pioneers of the entire modern paranormal investigation craze. And it was such a blessing to be able to work with them and for them. But it was a harrowing account that we were never going to talk about. And this was in 1993 that it took place. And we had help from a bishop who helped with the exorcism aspect of it. But when I learned in 2012 that there were actually paranormal teams out there using Ouija boards inside people's homes, I couldn't believe it. And I called John Zaffis, who was one of the people, of course, who was working with the Warrens as their nephew. And he said, "It's an epidemic," you know. And I said, I have to call and see if I can recreate this case specifically to warn kids against using Ouija boards, which is why this case spiraled out of control in the first place.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit more about the dangers of that? Because that's something where it's
Sure.
in stores.
Absolutely.
It's marketed by a board game company
Right.
for kids for like a little cute little Halloween thing. We've got glow-in-the-dark ones. We've got boutique ones. You can get at cons like this. What is the danger?
So Ed Warren, my mentor and teacher, said it's the most old, even maybe even timeless. This is a direct quote. Old, maybe even timeless. The Ouija board is the most dangerous piece of negative occult paraphernalia there is. The reason is because you're actually invoking these entities that you don't know what you're addressing. You don't know where it is, what its intentions are, whether it's lying to you, but you're inviting it to use your hands to manipulate the planchette on the board, and that's very dangerous. People think, oh, well, nothing happened because I didn't see anything happen. Well, the human eye can only perceive 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is visible light. That's how blind we are in these bodies. Cats and dogs can see much more than we can, and we can't see hardly anything. Yet we say, well, nothing happened. Well, how do you know nothing happened if you can't see what's going on? The danger is, as Ed always explained, and that the Ouija board is responsible for 95% of all the cases of inhuman infestation, like a flea infests a house. You're giving it permission to enter your world, and they'll take you up on that permission if you've connected somehow with the wrong types of entities, right, who seek nothing more than to destroy your life. The danger is you start using it more and more and more, you get obsessed with it, and that's the danger where you can really get in big trouble because it'll start asking you, well, if you want more information, then you have to do something for me. Just like in the case with the Annabelle case, you know, she was obsessed with it and basically invited this, or agreed to allow the spirit that she was communicating with, who she assumed to be a little girl, to inhabit the doll. And it was most assuredly not a little girl. And then all hell broke loose with that case. So my purpose is to warn preteens and teens not to use a Ouija board and not to delve into these things. Now, when you look about where it was made, Parker Brothers, right? And this is just the modern version of the Ouija board. Ed thinks it's timeless, it's ancient. They were sold by Parker Brothers. Well, if you look at the Parker Brothers logo on the box, it's a spiraling vortex, right? They know what they're doing. And even the instruction book, you know, it's sold as a toy, as a cure-all for all that ails you. That's another quote from Ed. It's some great quotes. And it's nothing of the sort. Yeah.
Now, when you're talking about your book here. This is a true account, but you were telling me that the format is a little bit different, so that it's a little bit more accessible to other people that might not necessarily be a fan of nonfiction. Do you want to go a little bit more into that?
Absolutely, yes. I have a bachelor's in English creative writing, and I decided I would recreate the case from start to finish as if you're reading a fictional Stephen King book. All right, from the very first part where they drove by Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. This is a new poster art, actually Union Cemetery with the chapel and so forth. They were in a black Mercedes wagon and they were driving by the cemetery. So I created it in a cinematic style that really draws you right in, and you actually visualize it as you're reading it. It makes people feel like they're right there through the whole thing. And I wrote myself in as myself and changed the names of the family, obviously, but wrote the other people in as characters in this story. And what makes it really interesting is I've divided it into 3 different sections: infestation chapters, oppression chapters, and the possession chapters. And then I did something completely unique, and I'm really happy I did, and that is the analysis section is the final 100 pages. It's a chapter-by-chapter analysis where I explain all the activity going on and relate it to other very well-documented cases. Explain how I met the Warrens and my first several cases in detail that really led me to be able to deal with something like this. And people are really enthralled with hearing these types of stories because there's not many people that can claim that they've worked with both Ed and Lorraine during their prime, and I did. And now it's just a blessing beyond belief. I just realized what an honor it was. But back in the day, we had no interest. There was no selfies. There was no shows going on. Nobody had any interest in making a name for themselves.
There certainly wasn't movies about these kinds of people.
Exactly, but I'm really upset that Warner Brothers has gone and, taken creative license to alter what they saw fit to alter. And that's another reason I said I'm going to release this case, which is more terrifying than I would say any of those movies, and make sure that nothing is altered. So the analysis basically breaks down what the family did right and what they did wrong, and what other families have done in these circumstances, to help you understand what not to do should these things happen to you, and also how everything is vibration. Love is the highest vibration, fear is the lowest vibration, and these entities want to siphon off the fear out of your bodies and out of your psyche, and I call it the fear buffet, and starve them out. Don't feed them with it, and it's people have such an obsession with death and darkness and evil and demons, and they look at it like it's a big joke, like Lucifer, the show on they make a big joke out of everything. But it's all real phenomena, real entities, and you won't understand it unless you yourself have experienced it. Yeah. So I'm actually putting on a new series, and you'd be actually the first one to ever hear about it in a broadcast, and it's called Defeating the Demonic. And I have 3 bishops and a deliverance minister, all 4 of which are exorcists, and myself, I'm a demonologist. And we're going to be presenting the reality of the infestation, oppression, possession, and exorcism and deliverance to the world, so people will understand it's not something to joke around about.
Yeah. So where can they get this book? Where can they get the sequel? Okay. Could you tell us a little bit more about when we might be able to expect that show?
So I'm putting it together right now. We're starting in the East Coast, so I'm looking at venues at this point. I have all the speakers lined up. It's going to be really exciting. And so that'll be happening within a couple months, and I want to take it across the country and maybe internationally, ideally. But it's something that I think is timely because there's such a crazy exponential increase in these types of cases because there's so much focus on it. So through quantum physics, the observer can create reality, for instance. And if you're really just focused on all this stuff and people are just you're being bombarded with it all day long, you can actually attract this stuff in your life, and it's not the type of stuff that you want to attract. And many times you don't know how to get rid of it unless you have the help of clergy. And there are very powerful psychics who can help in this regard too. And I have 2 amazing women where I work with, and the things that they can do is just incredible. But Dark Siege 2 is the 2nd volume, and it's the 2nd portion of this one family's ordeal. And I had to release it as a 2nd volume because it included incubus and succubus attacks, which are sexual in nature. And again, I write in a cinematic format so you feel like you're right there experiencing it. In fact, Bishop James Long, I sent him the PDF for volume 2, and I said I'm really reluctant to release this aspect of this case, because it's deeply disturbing. And he read it, he read the whole thing in one sitting and said, you have to release it because people need to know that this is very serious, although very rare. But you need to seek help from clergy immediately. So he's a huge proponent of my books, and he actually made both my books required reading for his online demonology class.
you.